Hello, and welcome to Metachemistry. This is episode 148, and we return with a faction takedown episode. This series is where we take a look at a faction and more so look at it from the outside in, instead of talking about necessarily how to play them and what they're best at. We kind of take a more deconstructing approach to see, if you're seeing them on the other side of the table, what you can do to kind of combat them, things to look out for, and other ways to prepare for those opponents. And for this episode, we're talking Next Wave. So this is the newest sectoral in the game, the human forces that have allied with a combined army, and we're going to talk about how you can fight these so-called defenders of humanity. But before we get into that, I want to take a moment to say thank you to Mo Games, sponsor of Metachemistry, and you can find them over at their web store on mo-games.com, and as part of their sponsorship, all of our paid level patrons get a 10% discount code to that store, and for anyone that's a member of our Discord, whether you're a patron or not, can get entered in for free to win a $40 raffle coupon code raffled every month. To do that, you just join our Discord. It's free. You can just find it in the show notes as always. Hit the Mo Games roll, and then you'll need a United States shipping address to receive those items. Because what's better than games? Mo Games. And so, to talk about combating Next Wave, it is Ian and myself. Ian, how are things going for you?
I'm doing all right. Just work. Summer's kind of a busy time for me, and then was gonna do a Infinity tournament this weekend, and that kind of fell through because I ended up being up all night taking care of a sick dog. Everybody's cool. It just ended up with no sleep, so wasn't gonna happen.
Yeah. Rough.
Outside of that, continuing the explorations of Dropfleet Commander. A lot of fun. Great revamp on that system. And then actually we've been playing a lot of the Street Fighter board game that came out on Kickstarter a few years back. It's ridiculous. It's tons of fun. I'm not a huge Street Fighter fan. I've never gotten super into fighting video games. I'm frankly just not good at them. And
sure,
but this game is actually pretty cool. It has these like giant pre-painted models that are actually decent for pre-paints, like not bad. And you play cool. on a board with so spaces. It's not just two-dimensional. You actually can move around. And I'm talking two-dimensional in terms of how a fighting game is usually on a single plane on the screen. So you can actually have like a grid map. So you can move around, and there's like terrain and stuff you can throw your opponents into and stuff like that. But the system is actually kind of cool because you have all these cards, and you have your deck of cards in your hand, and when it's your turn, like you play a card like face down, and it could be like a strike or a projectile or a special, and your opponent can choose to block, and they just get basic dice. Or they can throw one of their own cards down, and if it's the same type of card, they counter and negate your card, and then like do something to you kind of thing. So there's a lot of strategy to it, and it can be a ton of fun. It really has a good feel for like the video game mechanics on it. But yeah, it's super ridiculous. It's super fast. So, you can do the traditional like best of 3 matches in like 30 minutes. So nice. You can get them going pretty quick. So that's been having a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's fun.
But hoping to get some more Infinity going soon. It's just work has not been helping me with that.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I've been able to get in some more games. I've been sticking with my beloved OSS, and that's been fun, just kind of jumping around and trying different things out. And I'm still exploring and discovering things and seeing, what new things I like and what's worked well and what hasn't. But feel like it'll be a while before I feel like I can really check out all there is to offer. It was a big update. There's a
Mhm.
lot of changes for OSS and a lot of really interesting things, but you can't take everything. It's I tried just for fun. I tried a midfield heavy list that was I think it was two Dasu, two Kanara, two Naga, and so I had the two EM mines, two viral mines, and a monofilament mine in the midfield,
Mhm.
and it was pretty silly. I ended up blowing way too many points into those sorts of things, and it wasn't working for me. But the idea in my head was really fun. So being able to play with a midfield that I wasn't
Yeah.
quite available before that.
Nice.
So yeah, otherwise, let's see, this will come out on the 27th, and so tomorrow I'm heading to Gen Con. So I'll be there working at the Corvus Belly booth with Jay and Co. So that'll be a lot of fun. So if you're going to Gen Con, I'll be there during vendor hall hours, and you can stop by and say hi. And after hours, I have no clue. We'll see what happens.
We know you. You're gonna go get drunk and be like, dancing on tables and stuff.
As I am wont to do. Yeah, that sounds just like me. So, so yeah, good stuff. I'm excited for that. And yeah, otherwise, the Krug is very rapidly approaching. The Corvus Belly Krug is coming up in just a hair over 2 months now. Very close.
Yep. So yeah, that's going to be coming up from October 1st through 4th in Denver, Colorado. It's going to be at the convention center this year, which is super cool. So yeah, if you're interested in coming and playing in the largest tournament in the United States and the oldest Infinity tournament going anywhere, I believe. It's going to be at that time, October 1st through 4th in Denver. So come on down and play in what's going to be the coolest tournament out there. And we're going to be there, not playing, but we're going to be
Yeah.
doing judging stuff and maybe other things we're going to kind of see. But yeah, it's going to be a ton of fun.
Yeah, so make sure to register. You can go find that over at corvusbellykrug.com. So, this is your notice. Go get it. Get those tickets. Now, aside of that, and on to our main topic for tonight, Next Wave. Now, Ian, I know that you've been kind of off and on with getting games in, but what is kind of the first thing that comes to mind when someone is walking up to the table, you swap factions, and you hear Next Wave?
I'm going to have to deal with a bunch of hidden deployment, weird things popping out of nowhere, and there's probably going to be a juggernaut or two getting rammed down my throat, and maybe Achilles, and now that Skyhound thing's floating around, and it's just a wonderful nightmare of things I just don't want to deal with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've not seen someone actually play a double Juggernaut list, and I feel like Juggernauts themselves have kind of
Oh,
fallen off after the initial
I've
excitement, but it's pretty
played
funny.
against a double juggernaut list multiple times.
Oh,
Also, a lot of fun because I countered the double juggernaut list with the double Vistra list and said, "Bring it, bro."
fair enough. Yeah. Who has the better ballistic skill now?
Yeah, it's like, oh, you moved. Here's my 2.5 dice uh of autocannon shots. Have fun.
Right.
It gets the
Yeah,
job
like
done.
for sure, for sure. Most things don't like getting hit with that. But one thing that immediately jumps to mind for me, besides like what you kind of alluded to in Puzzlers, is that I'm going to have to be really careful around which pieces they have, because I feel like one of the things that Next Wave is really good at is having this kind of lock and key sort of mentality when it comes to gunfighting. Like they have some vision control, but it's very limited. And so, more often than not, they're gunfighting their way past obstacles. And they feel like they have kind of a perfect answer to any given single arrow that you could present them. I think that's definitely a big strength of the faction is that they have things that will usually ignore your mods while imposing mods back on you for kind of whatever you throw at them. And now they can't do a lot of those things. Like it's one of those, if you do kind of cover all your bases, I feel like you don't really have much room left for redundancy in those roles, but you can cover for basically everything. So you have pieces that are warhorse or mimetic or that have albedo and that have mimetism and have MSV and kind of all of the different options that you would want to go into somebody else's defensive piece and be pretty confident on your odds. Other strength I would say with Next Wave is, I mean, kind of just some of the power pieces that you find are kind of faction defining for them. Just things that are so good that they're probably reasons why you play the faction in general. And the ones that jump out to me are the Skyhounds, the Puzzlers, and to some extent Achilles. And so they just have these really potent pieces that demand attention and can be really, really problematic if you don't have a good tool to combat them. What about you, Ian? Any other things that jump out at you in terms of things that Next Wave is really good at, like strengths to be concerned of?
I think that they have just an extreme amount of flexibility with their characters. Like they have a character to do every job, and that you can part those characters out into the fire teams to really give a lot of flexibility to what they're able to do. Like, 'cause like basically every fire team has access to at least one of their characters. And
have to
just,
in most
yeah,
cases.
yeah. In a lot of cases, that is a unit that you have to. So like the Dragon Fire teams have to have Drakios, but then like, not saying you should do this, but you could throw Kodali in with like Control Fire teams or the Heavy Fire teams. I'm not saying it's a good option, but you could. But then like the Harbingers teams, like you could throw Achilles or Tussair or Kodali in there. Like that gives you some really good flexibility. The Research Fire teams, like you have to have Pandora, but then like you could also have Achilles, and Achilles can go on like just about everything because it's Achilles.
Yep, it's
like
true.
yeah. And then like the Shadow Fire teams, it's like, okay, cool, like a Patroclus or Achilles or both, or kind of whatever. And then of course the Team Achilles, where you just throw in every character in the faction into one fire team, which is super awesome, but probably not the best idea.
Yeah, it's a fun like power fantasy list, but
I
I
do
don't
like
know
how it has
how
a no
reliably.
wild card restriction on the Team Achilles. It is like, no, you are taking the
Yeah.
characters. You could put one of the Kodalis in there or a Rain Dancer instead of one of the characters that's not Achilles, but you are not wildcarding anything into this. It is, and that's actually kind of a new restriction we don't really see anywhere else in the game right now, right?
I can't recall seeing that sort of note anywhere else. And they have very
Yeah.
few wildcards to begin with, actually, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Like they're very fire team focused.
Mm-hmm.
And just because of how I feel like that plays very heavily into their list builds, you're going to see several teams, like lots of small teams running around, which you would expect of any faction Next Wave that can have an extra Harris. So having a core and two Harrises, or a duo in there somewhere, things like that, I think are very common. But their wildcards, all they have is the Nexus and the Gearhead.
Yeah.
And so the wildcards don't really play a big role in this faction as they would in, say, some of the Nomad factions, for instance. Like I feel like Tunguska or Corregidor are much more centered around like what wildcards can you stick into a team to do something cool.
Yeah. These wildcards are more opportunistic, I would say. Like getting a gearhead in somewhere can be very useful. And then like getting a Nexus isn't necessarily super great, but can bring some utility to, especially to Unidrons and Harbingers. So you're kind of your lower end, more basic line trooper guys.
Mm-hmm. And Nexus troops, or Nexus operatives rather, did get an update and kind of have some interesting profiles. They've got a lot of cool like tech on them that's fun. But yeah, I feel like I very rarely see them in Next Wave. Like every once in a while I'll see one, but not much.
And then it's also like you could take a couple of Unidrons, but you actually
Mhm.
can't fire team them in this. So like the Nexus really only goes with the Harbingers for getting some bonuses.
They can go in control duos and Harrises, but no cores.
Yeah, it's very kind of limited. So yeah, I would put them with Harbingers before I would do Unidrons.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair. I don't really
Yeah,
think
especially because I
Unidrons
would.
when I think
Yeah,
Next
yeah.
Wave.
Well, if I'm doing control fire teams, I'm thinking Steeljaws and Blackhearts, and the Tech Drakens are going to be much cooler, more useful than the Unidrons, in my opinion.
Sure. Yeah, and this I think will come up a little bit more when we talk about weaknesses in the faction. But yeah, the control team with Tech Drakens is kind of odd, considering there's no way to get a fire team master in there. But we'll talk about fire team master a little bit more here shortly. Other strengths I would say is that they, besides those power pieces and the fire team flexibility is a big part of it, and also they have a lot of like good tools for particular situations. And I think that kind of speaks to how they approach most aspects of the game. Like not a lot of their units are very multi-purpose. They tend to have a job and tend to be good at that job, but are often a little bit more expensive than you might expect a more dedicated specialist to be. A specialist in this regard, in terms of being specialized for a task, not necessarily for mission objectives, though that also.
Yeah.
But they have a handful of weaknesses that I think are important to keep in mind as well. And the first one of those that comes to mind is that they have a pretty high points floor. Like the cheap chaff to kind of afford all of these mid-tier and up pieces are pretty limited. Like, you can take a pair of Icadrons for your baggage and flamethrowers and whatnot. You can take one R-drone flashbot. You can take a Glyph war core. And for now, you can take a Sacha. But that's kind of it as far as anything under 10 points.
Yeah. And even in the teens, it's pretty limited. And a lot of those have some inherent drawbacks in terms of needing to have the controllers with cyber plugs in case of like the Sartroids and some of the stuff like that. So there's even more of kind of an extra tax to take some of those cheaper profiles.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's something where the list building can get kind of constrained. We talked about this some when we did our first impressions with Polynikes when they released in October of this past year.
Yeah.
But yeah, it puts you in a little bit of a bind in terms of list building, and they can be kind of awkward to build lists for. because they just feel a little bit more tight, a little bit more restrictive than many other factions. But having played with and against them, I feel like they're in a really good spot where most of the things in the list are costed well, and there's enough wiggle room to play around with some things, and it's not overly prescriptive in terms of things you must bring,
Hmm.
while still not having, busting things wide open and having access to, all of the best gunfighters in the game or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I think it's in a comfortable spot, but it is definitely a restriction for them.
Yeah, I feel like you have to make some hard choices when
Hmm.
list constructing because so much of it costs pretty premium as opposed
Hmm.
to a lot of other factions. So you definitely can't just take everything you want. You have to make some choices, and that you got to have a plan on how you're going to use it and how you're going to cover the weaknesses of the things that you're not taking.
For sure. Yeah. And I would say along kind of tied to the the expense portion of it, I think it's hard to really afford their very top end. You can, but I think that does make things tight. In my experience playing Next Wave, I've found that I'm more comfortable taking a number of things in the 30-ish point range instead of, running double juggernauts or things like that.
Hmm.
Even Achilles sometimes, and Achilles is, I would say, Achilles is aggressively costed. I don't know if he's like super undercosted for what he does, but he's pretty aggressively costed. But that's something you have to be very considerate of in the list, and so order count is something that they kind of have to be careful on
Yeah.
because they have a number of irregular troopers that they have to or will want to use fireteam masters to make regular in the form of the various tech dragons. And there's not really much way to gain additional orders. So,
Hmm.
for instance, tactical awareness is only on the Juggernaut and the Ironsides. And the Ironsides are, relatively expensive, and the Juggernaut's obviously a pricey tag.
Yeah.
As far as tags go, it's on the on the upper half of tags for sure. And there is NCO, but there's not many of them. I will say stingers will show up frequently, and so you'll probably have an NCO, but there's no additional lieutenant order lieutenants. And yeah, there's not really a lot of ways to squeeze out extra activations. There's not even much in terms of like impetuous units, for instance.
Hmm.
So things like that.
Yeah.
There are a couple frenzy units.
I feel like the faction really kind of hovers around like the 12 order range, give or take a little bit, but like getting your 15 in this faction, you're going to have to make some solid sacrifices to do that, and I'm not sure that there's enough benefit to warrant that in many cases.
I think that they can reasonably hit 15 orders. I just think you just kind of have to be a little judicious about it.
Hmm.
And if you're hitting 15 orders, it's much harder to afford some of those top end pieces without like
Exactly.
really stretching things thin. Like if you play
Yeah.
a more mid range list, then I think it gets a lot easier. But yeah, otherwise it can be kind of tricky for them to do that.
Hmm.
And so another that kind of in some ways is list building, but also plays out on the table is because they have several fire team masters, they're able to kind of get some very powerful profiles that are cheaper due to being irregular rather, that they turn regular with fire team master. So the ones that stand out, of course, are the tech dragons. And so you have the melee oriented steel jaws and the range oriented black hearts, and they're both very good units, and they're quite aggressively costed. Like overall, like they're a good deal, but you really want, particularly the black hearts in fire teams, and so you want to be able to use their order ideally, and so that's where Fireteam Masters come into play. And so they can be kind of vulnerable to sniping out Team Achilles characters, because you'll see that Drakios, Pandora, and Patroclus are all Fireteam Masters, and so they'll turn irregular members of their fire team regular, which will kind of help massage the points a little bit while not compromising so much on the overall fighting power of the list. Especially considering, a Warcore and for now a Sacha are fairly common inclusions. If you have a couple Tech Dragons also, and those characters get sniped out, it starts to really make the list function kind of in a clunky way. Not to mention that those characters often must be the foundation of their respective teams. Not all of them, but most of them, those have to be the fire team leaders. Pandora being, I feel like, the most common one, but same thing with Drakios, where if you knock them out, it's not possible to reform the team of the other members.
Yep.
So they kind of have this sort of linchpin style play surrounding the Team Achilles characters, and so if you can reliably excise those characters, then that will go a long way during your match. Any other general weaknesses of Next Wave that you want to touch on before we talk about individual units?
Yeah, I think that like they are generally solid in that like mid survivability range. Like most of their stuff seems to be at least like armor 2, which is pretty awesome. Like they have a few armor 1 things, your basic harbingers and gearheads, stuff like that. But they really seem to have like armor 2 on a lot of stuff. So it's one of those things that then opens up that like AP weaponry can be pretty solid against them, because they don't have a whole ton of immunities, it looks like. So it's just you can hit them with your different ammo types, but yeah, like AP would be pretty solid against a lot of the troopers in this.
Yeah, I could see that. The other thing that I thought of earlier and then forgot, but now remembered again, is their vision control.
Yeah.
Their vision control is very, very limited. The ones that have it are good. But so Patroclus is your only source of smoke, and he's commonly going to be on the version that has +1 burst BS attack, and he's commonly going to be in a fire team. So generally, inside of 8 inches, he's throwing 3 attempts and 2 real smokes on 13s, which is quite reliable in terms of most smoke throwers in the game. And then the Ironsides. And the Ironsides, there's one profile with a disco baller. Technically 2. It can be a lieutenant option as well. But there's one of those, and it's kind of like you have to be taking it only for that purpose almost, which feels kind of awkward considering the points value that they're at. And it's the multi-rifle small heavy flamethrower, or light flamethrower at PS6, and disco baller. And in order to get them a special die, which is preferable, you need either Drakios or a second Ironside. And so, you're looking at easily a 75 plus point duo at that stage. Just half of that is dedicated to just being a disco baller that's a moderate gunfighter only because of his weapons. Like it's just a guy with a multi-rifle. He's at BS -3 and albedo -3, and but that's kind of like the kit. And so, ideally, if you wanted to have a gunfighter version, ideally you're looking at like the APHMG or the rocket launcher, or you want a specialist, and so you take the hacker and things like that. So you have to really want the disco baller in particular to take the profile. And so
Yeah.
the pieces that have it are pretty decent. They're just very limited, and that's kind of all you have. And so vision control, like I kind of said at the top, is just something that they have to be very intentional about, and there's only going to be generally one or maybe two pieces in a list, if that. And I see plenty without either, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, that kind of gives us a framework to view their various units. And so next, what we want to do is take a look at some of their more potent pieces and kind of the common picks that you can expect to find. Like, these are units that if someone says, oh yeah, I'm playing next wave, these are some of the units that come to mind for me as far as, oh, I feel like I'm very likely to see these units. And so I would say one of the first ones that jumps out to me is the Skyhound. The Skyhound is a wildly good flyer. A big part of it is that it has the main profile that you'll see is the +1 BS or +1 burst, plasma carbine, AP Thunderbolt, shock mine dispenser.
Mm-hmm.
And it has the strengths of all other flyers, generally speaking, in terms of its maneuverability. It's got a solid ballistic skill of 14, so it's on the upper end of flyers, tied with the Red Eye. It has, it's tied for the second highest armor, I believe, at armor 4 in BTS 6. It has its structure and remote presence, unlike several of the other flyers, so it's a little bit easier to repair if it does go down. It's a MIM 6 flyer, with the dodge -3 as per usual. Importantly, it has a Discover +6, which kind of helps it combat one of the somewhat weaknesses of flyers, which is camo markers, where you're punishing that order efficiency a little bit by having things need to be discovered first or not knowing exactly what to expect. And so this is just a little bit better than others on digging those things out. But having a flyer that has a long range gun with good burst that is lethal is very uncommon for flyers. Like, most of them don't have weapons that fire well beyond 24 inches that aren't disposable or non-lethal, like in the case of the Flamen Spears or emitters and the like.
Yeah, and then this one
And
also gets the
yeah,
triple template.
yeah, I mean, plasma is obviously just powerful in general. It hits hard enough because it ignores the save benefit of cover. It's the Thunderbolt makes it easy to advance, because one of the ways to keep back flyers is that you can have arrows that can outrange them and put them on bad numbers as they're trying to come in. And that's just not really something you can effectively do with the Skyhound.
Yeah.
Because the Thunderbolt, even after its positive range goes to 0. And so, like, it's just not something you can get on terrible numbers usually and still be, advantageous into it. Like, unless we're talking something like maybe an intruder sniper or something, where it can leverage mimetism and has MSV back.
Yeah. And make sure your fire teams are spread out when you deploy, especially if you're going second, because that template will destroy everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, plasma weapons in general are very dangerous. Like, luckily, at least this thing can't go into suppressive fire with these weapons. So that helps. But yeah, I think a Skyhound is something that you need to plan for if your opponent is playing next wave. I feel like that is top of my mind. This is their reserve drop, almost certainly.
Mm-hmm. Agree.
What about you, Ian? What's a top contender for you that you see, like, essentially in almost any or most lists.
Sartroids.
Mm-hmm.
They're just ridiculous. So you have the puzzlers and the ranters.
Yeah, the puzzlers for sure.
Yeah, and the puzzlers you're going to see a lot of. They're relatively cheap at like 12 and 13 points. Especially like the 12.1 has hidden deployment. It has an acrolite cannon and an emerat, plus and burst stun pistol, and a para -6 CC weapon, and a deployable repeater. So it doesn't really have anything that's lethal, but it has all the things that are just going to make your life miserable when it pops out of nowhere and glues your stuff down or isolates you or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's super annoying. And
Yeah.
yeah, like just not fun. And there can be two of those in the list. It's even better. And then the ranters, also there could be two of these. They don't hidden deploy, but they are guns. And so like 12 points gets you a submachine gun and a thunderbolt and a boarding pistol. So it has plenty of kind of nastiness, and they have forward deployment and mimetism -6 and all kinds of stuff. So they're pretty awesome. The key to these is to figure out and take out the cyberplug controller so that they kind of get locked into the the autonomous profile, so they can't really do anything. They just basically become an ARO piece. But
It makes them worse, and you can spend
yeah.
orders on autonomous units, on autonomous cyberplugs, so they can still
They don't.
receive orders, but at least their stats are worse.
Yeah, their stats are worse. They don't, and they don't generate orders. So like, you want to go after the controller anyway. So it gets rid of the order, makes them worse. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like, if you can afford a sensor in your list, or if you have some units that are warhorse that can kind of ignore, because I feel like generally the most dangerous thing that's going to happen with a puzzler, and the ranters are, I feel like the ranters are decent, but I feel like puzzlers are the ones that you always see.
Yeah,
And that
especially because they also have
generally,
infiltration, so it could be anywhere.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, them popping out generally with an emerat, or sometimes in a sacrificial way, like with a deployable repeater, if someone comes by, that can be really, really devastating, since you don't know that it's going to be there.
Yeah.
And so if you can afford sensor, that is worthwhile. But also things that aren't bothered by emerats, so BTS immune units or warhorse units, can help quite a bit in terms of at least mitigating their effectiveness. Because you kind of can't really do a lot about them unless you happen to catch them in a sensor before they reveal themselves.
Yeah.
And after, they're only moderately dangerous, because they're, even with a connected profile, they're just a BS-12 adhesive rifle or stun pistol if you're outside a template range, or you didn't care about the template in the first place.
Yeah.
Or a cryolite cannon, I'm sorry. Adhesive rifles on the other option that doesn't really see play, which is the one with camo one use instead of hidden deployment, and it costs more somehow.
Well, it's because it can technically re-enter camo. Oh, it's one use. No, it
Yeah,
can't.
one use.
That is a little bit weird.
Yeah. But
Okay.
yeah, one bit of extra spice to keep in mind on these is, I feel like most often they come out in ARO, but if they come out in active, they do have surprise attack -6, which is very rare. There's very few things in the game. I think the Hassassin Ayar was the only one for a while.
It was the
I think
only one forever. This might be the second one.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think this is the only other one now. 100% agree. Puzzlers are something that you kind of just have to expect.
And you know what the sad thing is? I'd rather face the Yair.
Right.
I'm just sorry. I would rather deal with the Yair because it's less of an annoyance.
I mean, yeah, not having, if you move and then something pops out with an Emerat, and that catches, a couple guys in a fire team or something, and you're just like, oh no. It can be pretty problematic.
Yeah, well, also the air costs like almost 4 times the points, so it's more acceptable when it does something stupid to me.
Yeah. I mean, like 3, but they also have some shenanigans, and they can keep reusing that surprise tag.
Well, yeah, and the triangulated fire shenanigans with
Yeah.
them. But again, you're paying a lot more points for it, so like
Sure.
It's more acceptable to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and another one for me, I would say, I kind of want to just say Team Achilles, because they're so integral to like fire teams and stuff. But that covers a lot of things. So I would say the most common, in order from my anecdotal experience, I would say the most common going to be probably in order roughly Pandora, Achilles / Tissair, then Drachio / Patroclus. I feel like usually
marginally agree. I think Tissair is hands down the one I see almost every single time, and then Achilles, and then Pandora. And then I would say Drachio. Patroclus just doesn't come up. I don't think I've actually seen somebody play him.
Yeah, I know he'd be down near the bottom, and I know there's plenty of people that don't really like Drachios. But I feel like Pandora shows up so often because she kind of unlocks the power of stingers.
And that's fair. I feel like I don't encounter her that much. But
yeah,
I will say that I've seen Tissair in almost every single list that I've fought against.
Gotcha. Yeah, so I mean, just for sake of time, I'm not going to go over all of Team Achilles by any stretch, but just kind of go over some of the things that they'll bring and what you need to look out for. And so for all of Team Achilles, they're all moderately durable or more because they're all 2 effective wounds, or 3 in the case of Achilles. So they're all at least relatively durable. Pandora is a hacker, and she has 0 pain, and she's one of the fire team masters that we discussed earlier. And she is the least expensive of the bunch, and I feel like she has the most unique fire team, or rather, she has the research fire team is built around her, and that's the only place you can put stingers. Everything else can go in another type of fire team except for stingers, and stingers are very good. And that would probably be the thing I would talk about after these. So she has a medikit, but is not a paramedic, so she can't do certain classifieds and things like that. But she is a hacker, and so can do everything related to that. She's fairly inexpensive. She can be a chain of command if she doesn't have a medikit. So she is a very common piece in my experience. And with her, I think Tissair is up there, and he is just a pure gunfighter. He effectively is like a souped up black air, if such a thing ought to exist. But he's, a great ballistic skill of 14 with MSV2 and MIM3, and of course he's got no wound cap because all of these characters are effective 2+ wounds. And then he can either be a neurocinetic plasma sniper with a zapper, or he can have he has an FTO option, which can go in the teams with the shadow team, or not the shadow teams, the harder teams. So you can go in with Harbingers as a Feuerbach FTO if you want a more active option. Or you can have the standalone active plasma sniper. But he's just a great gunfighter and is kind of a gear check piece if you can't deal with that. Like, it's another one of those like, hey, I can ignore what you have and impose mods on top of it still sort of piece. So you need to have an MSV 1+ with albedo or BS -3 in order to inflict mods back and not accept mods. So you kind of have to have a very particular piece to be well suited. Otherwise, you just hope
Marksmanship
that
would
you
help.
outdice him.
Yeah.
Marksmanship, sure. So,
But
yeah, things like that.
yeah,
And
he's just
then,
gross.
yeah, he's pretty nasty. Achilles is just a whirlwind of destruction. He's got great close combat. He's got a full 3 vitality. He's got a X-visored plasma rifle or an AP Spitfire, and he's got BS attack SR -1 on his weapons, and he's got mimetism and nanoscreen. There we go. That's what I was thinking of. He's got mimetism and nanoscreen, so he can kind of just dive at you and never feel like he's losing any efficacy. I think the plasma rifle is probably the better pick most of the time, just because the template, yeah, the X visor mitigates the range well enough, and he can still get into range fairly quickly. And he's got essentially 15s across the board for his stats.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, like if he CC is generally where he's most where he's the not most vulnerable, but the least durable, I guess, because you can get around nanoscreen and chunk into his only 3 armor, but then you're in close combat with Achilles, which is not
and
an
you're
awesome place
ignoring the mimetism and the nanoscreen to hit penalty as well. So yeah.
Yeah. So that's when you have the best chance, but unless you're something like
half
like a Hatamoto, maybe.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I mean, even a lot of JSA doesn't want to like flip coins with Achilles because he'll outlast most of them.
Yeah.
But
now another fun thing is that because if you take the plasma rifle as lieutenant, you get an extra SWC.
Yeah, at that point, it's more about like how many things that are cheap enough after you take Achilles to warrant taking at 7 SWC worth of things.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's cool.
Opens up a few options. Ugh. But yeah, he's just gross. Just he's gross.
He's a house for sure, and he'll go and he'll wreck stuff, and he's just a great attack piece that isn't particularly vulnerable to all that much.
Yeah. Well, and then like
he's not invincible, but he's like there's not much that is like extra good into Achilles necessarily.
Well, yeah. Well, even shooting, because of the way that nanoscreen works, like you hit him with AP and he goes from an effective armor 6 to an effective armor 5. Like,
yeah, exactly.
So yeah, the AP works on just about everything else. Doesn't hardly do anything to Achilles. It gets you 1 point.
Yeah. And then with Drakios and Patroclus, just to go over them quickly, Drakios' main claim to fame is his albedo -6, and he has BS attack continuous damage on either a multi-rifle Mark 12 or Red Fury, and he has a synced peripheral option. I don't really like that option very much. I would rather take the FTO option. He is another fire team master, and he is, he's got the triple CC, but he's fairly fast, and so he's a specialist operative with stealth, and so I think he can do some interesting things. I know that opinions on him are rather divided, but I rather like him because there's not a lot of albedo 6 in the faction, and he's one of the options for that, and you can do some kind of cheeky stuff like take him to form a Dragonfire team with a Rain Dancer with extra burst contender and have your pretend T2 Spitfire and continuous Red Fury with your choice of either an albedo 6 or a Mim 6 fighter as the situation demands, which is kind of fun. But
yeah, but you're missing the scariest thing. Continuous damage Panzerfaust.
Oh, the Panzerfaust can be continuous, sure. Yeah, he has all his weapons.
That is the most ridiculous combination. It's like, okay, I hit your tag with my Panzerfaust. Oh, I only got 1 through. Well, guess what?
They're
Still
all,
gonna probably maybe take your tag down.
yeah, right. Yeah, it's one of those things where it can just, like all continuous weapons, they can just spike and all of a sudden like destroy practically
Yeah.
anything, which
Yeah,
is
AP
obnoxious.
explosive with continuous is just it's ridiculous. Oh,
It is gross.
gross. I don't want to.
Yeah, like why CB? Um, but yeah, I mean, Drakios, luckily, he doesn't have any way to improve his shot, and he's just BS13, which is perfectly fine, but not anything wildly spectacular without extra ways to ignore modifiers. But at least he can. He's a good backup piece for scalpeling out those marksmanship or MSV units. And then Patroclus, his main benefits, I feel like, are being able to bring smoke. All of his profiles have smoke grenades, though I really like the heavy rocket launcher options the best with the BS attack +1 burst. Because it makes him a. Because he doesn't have any modifiers actually at all.
No.
I mean, he has nanoscreen, but so he's just in cover all the time, more or less. I know nanoscreen is not quite that simplified anymore, but effectively he's in cover all the time. And he's only armor 2. I don't know why he's the only power armored heavy infantry in the game, and by that I mean he has the hackable trait and is not immune to mobilize B or isolation or anything like that. He has all the drawbacks that heavy infantry would, but he does not have a true second wound. He has, or even a pretend for second wound. He has no wound incapacitation, but he's not immune to shock. Like, why of all units is this the only one in the game that has power armor? This is kind of a you're on the council, but we do not give you the rank of master sort of energy to it.
I mean that tracks.
Yeah,
that tracks with the lore.
yeah, he's supposed to die.
Also,
yeah.
let's just face it, he didn't get to have all the cool toys because they had to resurrect him. He lost some stuff when he died.
Except he got new stuff and is generally better.
Yeah. But you can still do the old school holo projector jank because he has holo mask, and then his forward deployment profiles have holo projector, so you could put your 4 Achilles down. Not that's gonna help you,
no, not at all.
Because they can't fire team anymore like they used to be able to with the holo. Yes, Patrick used to have exclusive rule to allow him to fire team while using holo projector, so you could have a fire team of 4 Achilles, and it was awesome. But you can pseudo do that now.
Yeah,
coordinated order, and you're good.
N3, wasn't it?
That was N3, yeah.
Yeah,
it was super fun.
But yeah, the main draws for Patroclus is that he's solid in close combat. He brings smoke. He has a the rocket launcher is a solid weapon, especially with the extra burst and likely a special die. He's another fire team master to help out with your tech trackings and the like, and he is another specialist operative. So that is a relatively quick, but not as quick as I might have liked, rundown on Team Achilles. Any other units you want to highlight? I think just for sake of time, you might pick. If you have another unit, feel free, and otherwise, I'll just do a couple quick honorable mentions.
I mean, there's a number of them that are really cool. I am going to go way into left field, and I'm going to highlight something that I actually don't think you're going to see a whole lot, but I personally think is really cool. And you might see it. The best war core in the game, the Glyph war core.
No, I think you'll see war cores a lot because they're so cheap.
Fair enough. But they're identical to normal war cores, except they have dodge +3. So they dodge on 14.
+1 point.
Yeah. But it tickles me. I love that Combined somehow now actually has a war core. And it's just a little bit better to be different. I think it's awesome. I actually super excited to see, if we get some different model options for that, because like we've gotten so many
Yeah.
for like the regular human war core, because I think there's like 6 now if you count the 3 war core exclusive ones. So like, yeah,
That's
come
probably
on,
right.
yeah,
I'm sure
let's
there
get
will
some.
be
Like honestly, I
because
think that'd be cool if they
the
do like their next exclusive one for the war cores is we can get like 2 more. It'd be great.
yeah, I'm sure there'll be a general release because the glyph was the pre-order bonus from
Yeah.
the next wave launch.
Yep.
So I'm sure there'll be a general one, probably next year if I had to guess.
Yeah. But I'm saying just also do a war core exclusive one, because that'll be cool.
There you go. And then, yeah, real quick to round out the common things that I think you'll see very, very often are the gearheads, because they're there to mostly to bring Cyberplug. They may or may not also be an engineer, but that's usually the go-to Cyberplug because they're cheaper. The Harbingers, partially because of the high floors or high points floor, and they actually have some useful profiles. Like they've got some good utilitarian kits, and they all have zappers, which is quite nice on Harbingers and Stingers to round out the light infantry here. And so Stingers, again, they're just kind of the lock and key sort of solution where it's, they have BS -3 and MIM 3. They have Warhorse to ignore BS -3 back, and then the common profile I see is the MSV2. So they're also ignoring mimetism in return with the multi-marksman rifle. Sometimes I'll see the heavy machine gun, but more often I'll see the multi-marksman. Every once in a while, I think once or twice I've seen the hacker, but generally speaking, the multi-marksman rifle with MSV2, just because you're ignoring so much and applying usually a good 6 in return.
Yeah.
So those are kind of like, I would say, the main ones. There are, normally we'd go over some units that are kind of uncommon but might show up every once in a while, kind of curveball units. I would say things like the Contrabandoleros or the Juggernauts kind of fall into that category for me.
Mhm.
I might even say the Cliff Jumpers, but I'd say they're a little bit more common than that, but not quite, all-star bringing most lists.
Yeah, the Wraith ones.
The Wraiths, yeah, I would say that they're not often picked, but will show up sometimes, so they can do some interesting things. And again, they're another like mod soup sort of one. They're MIM 3 MSV 1 marksmanship, and so they can deal with
Biovisor,
a lot of modifiers.
just in case.
Biovisor. Yeah, not for modifiers or for shooting modifiers, but yeah. But more importantly for you at home, I would say that talking about their hidden information is going to be probably the next most useful thing we can do, which kind of leads us into some of those honorable mentions anyway, like the Contrabandoleros. So the Contrabandoleros is their only skirmisher. They're an infiltrating, hidden deployment, but only MIM 3 unit, so kind of a halfway between like your basic skirmisher and your advanced skirmisher, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
They're a lot like the line troopers in that they have the +3 dodge bonus on medium fizz, and they have zappers on all their profiles. You have your kind of normal complement of submachine gun decharge zapper hackers, one that's a mine layer with shock mines instead, or you can take the basic combi rifle with paramines, or a forward observer that swaps out for a boarding shotgun and has no mines. And so these are, things that you'll see every once in a while. I don't find them to show up very often because they are kind of pricey. Like they're pushing the bounds of like the MIM 6 hidden skirmishers in terms
It's
of
that
points.
infiltration on 16 base.
Sure, yeah. So they land on 13s on the other side of the table, which is reasonably reliable. Obviously, one we've talked about at some length are the puzzlers. Those, I think, are the most common hidden unit you will find. We've talked about what those do. Beyond that, we have a couple drop troops. You have Kodali, which I think is just not going to show up hardly ever. She's not a specialist. She is pretty expensive. Like, she can do some interesting things. She's got burst 5 with her assault pistols at close range with MSV2 and BS14, and she's immunity arm, and all these things that look really cool. But she's 1 wound in the mid to upper 30s.
Yeah.
And that feels like it's hard to justify that. She is a specialist, which helps, but she's just a generic specialist operative with whip 13. It's not like she excels at that role. And I think much more likely you're going to see the next one, which are the cliff jumpers. And they land on 13s, which is slightly better than Kodali, actually. They have templates on all of their profiles. Sorry, that's not quite true. The Fort Observer doesn't have a direct template. I guess he has paramines, but the Fort Observer has a shotgun and paramines. The Killer Hacker has the submachine gun zapper, and then the standard one has a light shotgun, heavy flamethrower, and paramines. And they all have BS stat +1 burst and mimetism.
Yeah.
And so they're a fairly credible threat in that regard. So, and they're also in the low 20s. So, I feel like I just don't see Kodali making the cut with how expensive a lot of these things are.
Yeah. And then for kind of your hidden ARO piece kind of thing, the Wraiths do have a couple of hidden deployment profiles.
Yeah, like the multi-sniper Wraith, for instance. Another one I don't see very often, but is something that you have to keep an eye out for. Like, there are options for them. And then I think last thing in terms of hidden information, I guess there is the hollow mask on Patroclus / hollow projector. I mean, if he's hollow projectoring, then you kind of know that it is Patroclus, but otherwise he can hollow mask on all of his profiles. So it's not easy to go through quickly, but pull up the fire team charts when you're playing Next Wave, and that will help a lot as far as knowing, because they're very particular in how you build them. So
you've also forgot. You could, if you really wanted to, take a Cube Jaeger.
Oh, that's right. They do exist in the Sectoral. That's true.
Yeah, they do.
You could take a parachutist Cube Jaeger. That's off
I
the board.
love the model. I love the concept. I am such a hard time finding any faction where they can take a Cube Jaeger where there isn't something else that fills the role better.
Yeah. And I think the trend continues here. Like, for just a couple points, you get cliff jumpers.
Yeah. Which, again, have 2 specialists. And that CC-16 with a monofilament weapon on the Cube Jaeger, it just isn't cutting it.
Yeah, it's just not. And the cliff jumpers are more mobile. They have the option to combat jump. And combat jump on a 13, especially if you do bring the Evo to bring it up to a 16, puts you in a pretty reasonable spot. I would feel plenty comfortable dropping that.
Irregular, so that also doesn't help.
Yeah. Any other off-board stuff that I'm missing before we talk about lieutenants?
I don't believe so. I think we covered all the off-map stuff.
I think so. So there's not a ton of surprises available in Next Wave. And of those surprises, a good half of them are not things that are likely to be brought. But those are some things you can kind of keep in mind as possibilities.
Yeah.
And so I think the last thing we want to talk about, I know we're kind of running out of time a little bit, but the last thing I want to talk about are lieutenant options. And lieutenants are really interesting in Next Wave in that they are
5 of them.
All whip 13, except for Achilles. So it's either, if they're announcing on a 15, it must be Achilles. And if it's on a 13, the other options are pretty apparent. It's almost always going to be Harbingers. and there will likely be a decoy harbinger somewhere.
Mhm.
Those are the common ones, and those are going to be just the basic combi zappers. And I feel like otherwise you'd want one of the more interesting profiles, like the forward observer or the hacker or something like that. And so if you see a pair of combi harbingers, almost certainly that's because they're lieutenants. Rather, one is a lieutenant. The Nexus operative, which is a hacker, which is kind of
Mhm.
interesting, but I don't think I've ever seen someone take a Nexus hacker lieutenant in Next Wave. Not to say that you couldn't, of course, just that
Yeah.
I feel like that doesn't come up very often. Then you have the Ironsides, which this one I could see because that is the one that brings the Disco Baller that we talked about earlier. So
Yeah.
like there's reason there beyond just it, you know, if you want to save points and not have to take the tax of a pair of harbingers. Now, maybe you're bringing FTO to Ser and that wasn't a tax and you were planning on doing that anyway, but the Ironside is an option, and then the Juggernaut. And the Juggernaut Lieutenant is the multi HMG version, the good version, but not necessarily the fun version because it's not the plus one plasma rifle. But
with a heavy rocket launcher, all the templates.
Right, yeah. So there's not a ton of options, and it's kind of interesting that they do hide themselves reasonably well because so many of them are Whip 13. But I don't think you're going to see more than one of almost any of these in a list anyway, or even in conjunction with each other. You know what I mean? Other than, like I said, the Harbingers. So I think they kind of have a little bit of obvious lieutenant syndrome just by nature of how they have to build lists. And the Harbinger's the only one you could reasonably get a decoy of. And of line trooper lieutenants, it's one of the more expensive ones you could get at 13 points in terms of factions across the game. And they do have chain of command, but chain of command is only on Team Achilles units, which you want to kill anyway. So you have Pandora. An easy way to tell if Pandora is chain of command is if she does not have a medikit. Like, she does have profiles that don't have medikits and are not chain of command, but I feel like you're always going to take, you're either going to make her chain of command or you're going to pay the couple extra points to get her the medikit. And that's almost always going to be one of those two. I feel like you'll rarely, like, I don't think I've ever seen someone take her with the SNG because it's just not worthwhile to spend the extra points for that when you could have her pick up your better fighters. And then the other is Patroclus. And Patroclus is chain of command on one of his FTO +1 burst rocket launcher profiles. And that one, there's not an easy way to tell other than, okay, he's got +1 burst rocket launcher. And so he may or may not be chain of command, and he's already a specialist. So it's not as easy to tell with him. His loadout doesn't quite give it away, but those are the only options. Now, he does have Hollow Mask, so it might be hidden, but those are kind of the only ways to get chain of command in a list where lieutenants are fairly obvious.
Yeah.
And there's no counterintelligence in the list.
Yay!
So another thing to kind of keep in mind, and also kind of pulls back into what we were talking about earlier in terms of they don't have high order density. And so that is just kind of another thing that kind of keeps them in check a little bit. But yeah, I know there was a little bit of a blitz as this is going a little bit longer than some, but anything else that jumps out in terms of the hidden or off-table info?
Nope. I think you got all of it.
Awesome. Well, with that, I suppose we can go ahead and just about ready to do final thoughts then. But I do want to thank all of our patrons for all of your support. We really appreciate your help in keeping the show going and doing all of our, keep the lights on support. It really means a lot to us. And if you are interested in willing in supporting the show directly, you can find us at patreon.com/metachemistry, and we have some benefits to kind of give in return to show our gratitude for that. And so we have things like final voting on polls, a couple private channels on the Discord, and the discounts to Mo Games and things like that, as well as early access to episodes. And so, yeah, if you're interested, you can find us over there. If not, we'd still love to have you on our Discord server. Just hang out and be a part of our community. And that is in the show notes as usual, and we'd love to have you there. So if you are looking for more places to chat Infinity, that's a good place to do it. And you can come say hi. We like getting feedback. If you have ideas for episodes, if you have your own techniques for dealing with Next Wave, or maybe you have a Next Wave player in your local scene who has some secret sauce, and these tips aren't helping, then we'd love to hear that too. But with that said, Ian, final thoughts on taking down Next Wave.
Yeah, I think they're obviously a very solid faction. I think they have a lot of strong pieces going for them. But I think that if you're able to focus and identify some of those linchpin pieces, like the Fire Team Masters or the Cyberplug controllers, and take those out, you can really rip the list apart pretty effectively. But obviously, you got to watch out for the hidden stuff that pops out, and the puzzlers will ruin your day.
Right? Yeah, I think that's a big portion of it. Is they can be a little awkward to defend against because they can bring kind of an answer to every problem. But typically, if they're doing that, it can't be everywhere they might need it to be. And so, also, like you said, they can start to kind of fall apart a little bit. If you take out even a couple key pieces, then it becomes much more difficult for them to react, and they don't necessarily have the right weapon or unit for a given situation. And again, it's being able to, in a way, kind of play their own game against them, where you can apply overwhelming force of modifiers, usually, but overwhelming force to a particular area to neutralize their strengths, and that can kind of cripple the faction. Also, like, a lot of their specialists tend to be Whip 13, so it's not like they're wildly reliable in that front. Their hacking presence is only fine. They don't tend to have much in terms of great killer hackers. They have a couple options, but they're not wildly standout pieces. Like they have Bit and Kiss, but she's not the more powerful version. They have Contrabandoleros and Cliff Jumpers that can be killer hackers, for instance. Otherwise, it's a lot of just basic Whip 13 hackers. Shout out to the Gearhead, I suppose, that has a firewall -6 built in, not a tin bot, but on their profile.
Yeah.
And they have several, notable pieces that are hackable, like the Juggernaut or Achilles or Patroclus and Ironsides and things. But yeah, it is. I think a lot of it is kind of bracing against their active turn, where they're at their most powerful, like every faction, generally speaking. But then kind of scalping out the most important threats, because I feel like most Next Wave lists kind of struggle with redundancy. And so you take out that stinger, like how much more MSV do they have, for instance? Usually not much. That's typically it, for instance. Maybe sometimes Tusair as well, but just as an example, they usually don't double up on those potent pieces because you want to kind of be able to have a tool into whatever situation you need. And so that makes them a little bit more susceptible to picking out linchpin pieces. I feel like it's a very kind of linchpin heavy faction in that regard. So yeah. So it's about those scalpeled, efficient strikes against Next Wave. And hopefully that helps. And if you have other tips for combating Next Wave, or you found some of these useful, or anything else, we'd love for you to leave some comments here on the podcast, or drop by our Discord, or otherwise let us know. And on behalf of Metachemistry, this has been Devin
And Ian, and that's the meta.